Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us here today at the Sunshine Cathedral via the website. And we want to welcome you to our worship services whenever you're in the Fort Lauderdale area. If you are in the area, we invite you to worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. We're located at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. And for those who watch us weekly on the internet, we invite you to check our website often for other listings and programming that we might have that may be of interest to you. And for now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine.
A reading from the Psalter. I will listen to what God is saying, for God is speaking peace to the faithful people and to those who turn their hearts to holiness. Truly, divine salvation is very near to those who revere God, that God's glory may dwell in our land. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is from 1 Kings. At Horeb, the Mount of God, Elijah came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." God said, "Go out and stand on the mountain, for the Holy One is about to pass by." Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He answered, "I have been very zealous for the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away." Then the Lord said to him, "Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. You shall also anoint Jehu as king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill. And whoever escapes from the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him." In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Would you please join me in the spirit of prayer? Let there be peace among us. And let us not be instruments of our own or others' oppression. And now may God's word be spoken. May only God's word be heard. Amen. Well, a lot has happened this week. It's been seems like this last week has lasted several months already. I learned during our board meeting on Tuesday night that evangelist, singer, healer, the Reverend Dolores Berry died. She was one of the early pioneers of the gay Christian movement. She was a Christian Methodist Episcopal minister who transferred into the Metropolitan Community Churches after only being in the CME for a year as a pastor, and she was just around ever since. She was part of the effort to employ inclusive language. She was an amazing preacher. She was a very gifted person. And so that happened. Not totally unexpected. She'd been ill for years, but still, one always is sad when a friend goes. Well, that was Tuesday, but then also during the week, the possibility of nuclear conflict seemed more real than it has at any time in my lifetime. And so, you know, that was kind of a bummer. And then in addition to that, a personal loss and a global terror, there have been, it seems to me, just almost an unprecedented number of friends and loved ones who are struggling with illness and depression right now. Maybe that isn't so surprising after all when you take things into the big picture. And then, as if that hadn't been, you know, an exhausting enough few days for all of us, then this weekend, right-wing racist nationalism erupted with terrifying boldness in Virginia. It's been a hell of a week. I think a lot of us are feeling exhausted, or angry, or scared, or all of the above. But we are not without resources. And it is my job to share the resource of hope, of encouragement during difficult times. And so I want to share with you 2 poems today. And the first is a well-known poem by William Henley called Invictus. Henley wrote, "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul." We can't always control what happens around us, but no one else can control how we respond to what happens around us. We are the captains of our souls. Last week, we heard about Moses and Elijah, and this week we hear about Elijah again, though Moses' shadow is still in the scene. Last week we heard about the Mount of Transfiguration, Jesus and his friends encountering Moses and Elijah. This week we see Elijah on a mountain again. But Moses is still sort of there, isn't he? The story is there, isn't it? It was on the mountain of God that Moses spent 40 days receiving the commandments, according to the legend. And eventually, Moses is able on that mountain to see the glory of God from a cleft, a hollow, a sort of cave in the rock of the mountain. The glory of God goes by, and from the safety of the cleft of the rock, Moses can sort of get a glimpse of that glory. Well, 4 centuries later, we see Elijah, and that's today's story. And where is he? He's on the mountain of God. And he has journeyed how long to get there? 40 days. And why is he there? Now, Moses, of course, is in the wilderness because he has stood up to Pharaoh. He's stood up to imperial forces. He has stood up to slavery. And he has said, let my people go. And he has led his people into a march for safety, a march for freedom, into a new realm, a new world, a new experience. And so why is Elijah now on this mountain? Because he too has stood up to empire. He has stood up to the king and queen. And the Queen Jezebel, she is part of a cult. And her cult, it represents, at least in Elijah's mind, represents greed and bigotry and violence and terror. And he has stood up to that. And now he is on her list. And so there's a price on his head. And we see him on the mountain of God, hiding in a cave, in a cleft in the rock. The literary similarities are intentional. Now, whether Moses or Elijah literally spent time on a mountain is irrelevant. The stories show the transforming power of communing with God. It shows that when we stand up to injustice, when we stand up to oppression, when we stand up and speak truth to power, there may be consequences. We may have to head for the wilderness. We may have to head for a cave in a mountain. We may be in trouble and have to take evasive action to stay safe. There may be consequences, and yet we will have the power to do so and to withstand it if we spend time in communion with God. How is it during World War II that Dietrich Bonhoeffer left the safety of the United States to go back to his homeland of Germany to stand up to the Nazi government and to confront the churches that weren't standing up to the Nazi government? It's because he had spent time in communion with God. And he knew that God would empower him to do what was difficult and what was dangerous, but was also right. He could not call himself a follower of Jesus and just remain safe and silent while Nazism was spreading across Europe. Bonhoeffer moments are dangerous, and they are necessary. But let's get back to Elijah. Elijah is on this mountain because he had stood up to his government. He has stood up to oppression in his context, and now they are coming for him. Moses had encountered God in fire and smoke, but Elijah, he's looking for God in all of the dramatic ways. There's an earthquake, and there's a windstorm, there's a tornado, there's all of these things, and that's not where he is experiencing the power of God. Elijah discovers that divine encounters sometimes happen without a lot of drama. In fact, God's peaceful presence can be the cure for too much drama. And so Elijah says he looks for the divine experience in weather and earthquakes and fire, but he experiences God as a still, small voice in communion with God. In the silence, in the quiet, in the stillness, he gets the power that he needs to move on and carry on. Elijah doesn't need storms and shaky ground. His life is stormy and shaky enough already. A vicious queen is after him. I know what that's like. Sometimes we don't need God to show up in a raging storm. We need God to restore us from the ravages of the storm. And so Elijah finds God in sheer silence. He finds God when he decides to go to peace instead of to pieces. Oh, without an inner peace, Bonhoeffer couldn't have taken the risk that he took, the risk that actually cost him his life. Sometimes we panic. We fret. We cry, we ask why, when it's all falling apart, when there is injustice, when there is unfairness, when there are difficulties, when the health just isn't getting it together, when our health just isn't cooperating, when relationships go sour, when the finances are just a disaster, when the world seems to be coming apart at the seams, when we are afraid to turn on any news network because they all have the same terrifying story going on. We fret and we say, why? And at such times, what do the enlightened ones encourage us to do? Whenever we have just been at the point of hyperventilating, at the point of just passing out, at the point of just being frozen with terror, what do the enlightened ones tell us? Breathe. Even in the gym, when struggling through an exercise, a good trainer will remind us to breathe. Breathe. Be present. The past may have been difficult and the future may be uncertain, but in this moment, we're okay. In this moment, we're okay. I am not a prognosticator. My crystal ball hasn't worked in years. I don't know what will be going on an hour from now, but right now, we're okay. So be in the moment. Be in this perfect moment. Breathe. Quiet the inner chatter. And in that peaceful moment, God's loving wisdom will sometimes break through, and we will sometimes feel refreshed, renewed, hopeful, or at very least not as frazzled. Elijah learned that in peace, in the inner chapel of his own soul, God was always present. And in God's presence, there was a healing balm that could soothe his fears and give him the strength he needed to confront injustice and oppression. We see Elijah in a cave today, but he doesn't stay there. And he doesn't find God in all of the drama and all of the antics. He finds God in the still small voice, and that still small voice encourages him to get back out there and continue making a difference. Elijah realizes he can't hide from the troubles of life. God isn't going to take a lightning bolt and zap away the problems. God isn't going to take a gale force wind and blow away the problems. God isn't going to send an inferno and burn away the problems. God isn't going to send a tsunami and wash away the problems. But what God will do is quietly speak to Elijah's heart and remind him that he is stronger than he realizes, and he can face the difficulties of life and find peace in the midst of them. He can continue to do what he feels called to do, and he can make a difference even when the sky seems to be falling. Elijah then realizes he's got friends. Hazael, Jehu, Elisha, they're all there for them. They're all there for him. They're going to do what they can for him. Now, the language of this ancient story uses some violent imagery, but basically what it's saying is you've got friends. You're not alone. People care about you. They've got your back. And the story also tells us that there are 7,000 people that haven't kissed Baal. 7,000 people that haven't bowed to Baal. 7,000 people who have not worshiped fear or bigotry or hatred or greed. There may seem to be no good people left in the world, but there are. There are good people. Even when we can't see them, they're still there. And that's reason to hope, Elijah learns. That's his miracle, that he can go to peace instead of to pieces, that he can see even in the midst of chaos, there are still blessings. He's got a few friends, and there's a lot of people out there he doesn't even know that they are good people. They have not worshiped Baal. They have not worshiped terror. They have not worshiped greed. They have not worshiped bigotry. They have not worshiped hatred. That is something to hang your hat on. And we want walking on water. We want walking through walls. We want to take some sardine sandwiches and feed thousands. And so when we want that kind of stuff, this seems like a pitiful little miracle. That's your miracle? No parlor tricks? Just God can calm your nerves? A pill could do that. Well, we always say a prayer and take a pill. If one doesn't work, the other will. God's in the medicine. But that's the miracle. God can calm your nerves. You've got friends who can encourage you. Here they are. And there are other good people in the world, even if the worst sort of people seem to be coming after you. That is a great miracle, maybe one of the best miracles you can imagine. When we don't need circumstances to give us our joy, and we won't let circumstances take our joy away. When fear stops being, forget everything and run, and starts being face everything and rise. When we don't need lightning bolts and earthquakes and angel choirs to feel God's presence, but we have been filled with a joyful awareness that there's not a spot where God is not. Oh, in a moment of dread and despair, the miracle of a peace that passes understanding is the greatest miracle of all. When horror gives way to hope, and pain is healed by peace, and tears wash away our fears, and might emerges from our fright, then we have everything. Contentment and assurance that come what may, all is well, that nothing can separate us from the love that God is. And then at least sometimes we start to feel better. But how wonderful that we don't need to wait for those things to get better before we start to feel better. The message reminds me of the wise counsel of the Apostle Paul, who wrote, "I have learned to be content with whatever I have. I know what it is to have little, and I know what it is to have plenty. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being well fed and of going hungry, of having plenty and of being in need. I can do all things through the one who strengthens me. Now, we sometimes will throw out that last verse as if that was the magic words that will get us our way every time. How's that working out for anyone? No, what Paul is saying is I can enjoy the good times and I can get through the bad times. I can have appreciation for what is good and I can have courage for what is rough. I can do it all through the one who strengthens me. It won't always go my way, but even when it doesn't go my way, it will not overwhelm me or overcome me because I can stand strong through the power of the one who strengthens me. And that is good news. We have seen in recent days in Charlottesville, Virginia, that the ugliness of hate is still a real threat. I never thought that I could honestly say or would need to say that white nationalism, and let's call it what it is, Nazism, is a real threat today. Not just a fringe group of wackos, we've always had those, but this is a nefarious ideology that has demonized and dehumanized people from way too public and powerful podiums. An ideology that has said they don't belong here, and they don't get to serve, and they don't get to have rights, and they don't get to be married, and they don't get to be treated with respect, and they don't deserve to be safe, and they get to be brutalized, and they should be separated from us by a wall, and they should be nuked, and we have heard so much about they that now people feel comfortable going to the street talking about they and them and the hell with them. And God forgive us for allowing that to happen. How could we have let that happen? And surely God is saying, how could you have let that happen? And so white nationalism, it's not the majority. It's not the majority of any religion or any party or any community. It's not the majority, but it never was. It doesn't have to be the majority to cause a lot of damage. And this ideology has infected churches and government alike. Will we ignore that sad and frightening reality? Or will we redouble our efforts to create a community of justice love that speaks out against destructive hate? Will we redouble our efforts to build a community of justice love that will offer a shelter of healing to all who are overwhelmed by the worst of human cruelty? Will we redouble our efforts to offer a healing and prophetic witness? If we want to do that, we will have to decide that we are going to peace instead of to pieces. That we aren't just going to bury our head in the sands. We aren't just going to complain amongst ourselves, but we are going to show up. We are going to show up with how we spend our money. We are going to show up with how we use our conversation. We are going to show up with what we donate to. We are going to show up with how and when and how frequently we worship. We will show up with time, talent, and treasure to say we are going to build up and be part of the Church of Jesus Christ that is over against and always opposed to hate in every form. And to do that, we need shalom. We need God's peace. We've had enough storms and earthquakes. It's time for that still small voice that will tell us, rise up and speak up and be counted. Come here, get refueled, get healed, and then get back to work. The world needs our hands to be God's hands of healing in the world. And so, in the power of peace, we will need to stand up and speak out for all who the keepers of power would relegate to the margins of society. Elijah learned that true success in life is not allowing the circumstances to dictate or diminish our peace of mind or joy of life. Life is filled with hills and valleys, but come what may, we have access to a peace that passes understanding and joy unspeakable. And if we will access that peace and determine to share that peace, which isn't always serene. Sometimes that peace means the work of justice love. But it means that we have the peace, the security to know that come what may, we are in the cleft of the rock. We are safe in God's keeping, and we will be nurtured by God's grace so that we can go back out and speak truth to power and stand up to Pharaoh or Jezebel or whoever the current threat may be. That's success. And it can always be ours. I promised you 2 poems, and so I'll end with the second one. It's from 1934, Evelyn Whitell. She wrote, "Though everything looks dark and drear, I shall succeed. Though failure's voice speaks in my ear, I shall succeed. I do not fear misfortune's blow. I tower with strength above each foe. I stand erect because I know I shall succeed. Though others' doubts are built around me, I shall succeed. Though fortune's ship I cannot see, I shall succeed. Through mist and rain I lift my eyes. I see the sunlight in the skies, and seeing it my glad heart cries, I shall succeed. Night swoops on me with darkest wings, but I'll succeed. I see the stars that darkness bring, and I'll succeed. No force on earth can make me cower, because each moment and each hour I still affirm with strength and power, I shall succeed. And so let us, as the blessed community, as the body of Christ, as the Church of Jesus Christ, say that we will affirm with strength and power that we shall succeed. We will succeed against hate. We will succeed against division. We will succeed against bigotry. We will succeed in bringing the good news of God's all-inclusive and unconditional love to every single person. And this is the good news. Amen.
'Twas on a sad and awful night, when powers of fear and death arose against a child of God's delight, and friends betrayed him to his foes. Before the mournful scene began, he took the bread and blessed and brake. What love through all these actions ran, what wondrous words of love was said. This is my body here with you. Receive and eat the living food. Then took the cup and blessed the wine. 'Tis the new covenant in my love. Do this, he cried, till time shall end, in memory of your dying friend. Meet at my table and recall the love of your departed friend.
I think it is clearer now than ever that words have power. The words we choose matter, and they reverberate long after we say them. And so it is fitting that we end every worship service with a benediction, a good word for us to hear and to take with us into the world. And so our good word today is right from Jesus. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. He also said, peace I leave with you, my own peace I give to you, not as the world gives, give I unto you. And so, my friends, go now in peace, and may an abiding peace go with you. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. If you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, we invite you to stop by and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, or if you'd like to find out other resources that the Cathedral has to offer, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, we look forward to seeing you here at the Sunshine Cathedral.